Hello internet. I have not got shorter, I am in a hole. This is the story of how I got three-phase power to my house for free. That's right, for free. Look, you can see a three-phase cutout. Is it just me or is that a bit wonky? Out of this is single phase for now, and that's going to be my problem. I will be putting my distribution board ready for the inverter, which involves another cable being fed to the house. But to the house, I have had three-phase power for free. I'm going to keep going on about that. And in this video, I will explain how you possibly could get three-phase power to your house and why you might want three-phase power to your house. Let's get started. Before we get into what this cost me and what disruption caused, the first go-to question is, what is three-phase power and why am I even getting it to my property? Why would I even want it? Well, three-phase power is basically a couple more cables, which gives you almost 3 times the power. Traditionally, generators in power stations spin, and these have 3 wires that come off them. These 3 wires together make three-phase power with 3 different sine waves, all 120 degrees out of sync from each other. Feels like a science lesson now, doesn't it? Now, most domestic houses do not need this level of power. We're able to tap off one of those phases, which gives us, between the phase and neutral, the standard 230 volts in the UK. You could almost say that it's too much power for a house of this size. But given that we, like many others, plan to go towards an electric future, meaning that our heating and the fuel for our cars is going to come from electricity, which can be made from a renewable resource, then this will massively increase our demand for electrical power, to the point where we might not get enough power through a standard single-phase connection. Now, the electrical energy network providers are well aware of this. Three-phase power is commonplace in commercial and industrial settings. In fact, it would be rarer in those situations to only find single-phase. Having three-phase power gives somebody the option to run three-phase equipment, things such as lathes or other workshop goodies. So for a workshop or shed dweller like myself, this could be handy too. More and more people are wanting three-phase power to their house. I got chatting to the National Grid staff that looked after me, and they explained how an entire new build estate near me was all supplied with three-phase power to the property. Now, it's not necessarily the case that all 3 phases would be used, but the cabling is there for the future. I've got to say, that's pretty forward thinking of National Grid, my DNO, and they seem to be ahead of other DNOs. Let's face it, connecting and pulling in new cables isn't cheap, so pulling in a slightly larger cable with 2 extra cores in the first place is a good idea, isn't it? Okay, so we've worked out what it is. A couple of extra wires that gives us more power to the property. The ability to use different three-phase equipment that you might not have been able to, and the ability to use all of the green technology that's going to come your way. Take, for example, a 3-phase EV charger. If you use a single-phase EV charger, you're limited to about 7.4 kilowatts of power. But for a 3-phase charger, you can use 22 kilowatts of power. Okay, so most cars won't actually charge at 22 kilowatts, more like 11 kilowatts on AC, but that's still more than we're going to get from our 7.4 kilowatt single-phase charger, and means that if you're on a tariff that allows you to charge an electric car at night during cheap times, you could get quite a lot of miles in that period. Say, for example, the Octopus Intelligent Go tariff. If you're not already with Octopus and you're interested in charging an electric vehicle for around 7-ish pence per kilowatt, while still having the ability to export for a profit from an energy storage system, then check out my referral code in the description below. I wonder if that's going to be useful for me. If you've been watching my videos, you will see that there's another reason why I wanted three-phase power. I've been embarking on an energy storage project that has me able to store electricity at cheaper times and sell it back to the grid at more expensive times. I've already been doing this with the energy storage that I have, but this will allow me to do this on a far bigger scale with my new three-phase connection. The battery that I'm using for this isn't a normal battery, and there's some challenges with communication, but all of this is quite fun and it's a bit of a wacky project. If you're interested in this, then check out the video series, which I'll link up here or here. I'm not sure, I can't remember. So, what exactly was the process? How did this happen? And how on earth did I get this for free? Yes, that's right, for free. The first step is to decide whether you really want three-phase power. For me, with an electrician background, it's a no-brainer. More power. Power, yeah? Anyway, you might not actually need the connection, but if you can get something for free, then it's probably worth doing, right? Even if there is a little bit of disruption along the way. If you have a large house and/or you're looking to run heat pumps, EVs, solar and batteries, then you're either already on three-phase or you definitely need to think about upgrading at some point. I discovered some time ago when looking at the maps of my property, before I hammered down an earth rod, that the electric cable came behind my garage and into the property under the stairs. Okay. So my earth rod could just go forward a little bit. But wait, hang on a minute. This means that my electrical connection came across from my neighbour's house and then to the road. This is called a loop supply. And what you're basically doing is asking one 25mm cable to power two properties. Fine, when the houses were built in the 1960s. But this isn't the 1960s anymore. We don't just run a wireless radio, a couple of lamps, and the telephone in the hallway. We got to supply power to all the things I've mentioned before. Now, this is where the free part comes in. If you need an EV charger, you need to contact your DNO, your distribution network operator. They will check what setup you have, and as I knew that I had a loop supply, I mentioned this to them. This is where they offered to install a new connection at my property. So, being the forward-thinking man that I am, my next question is,
can you put in three-phase power while you're there? I'm going to use all these things in the future.
And you produce these documents that describe the benefits of installing three-phase power in domestic homes for future-proofing.
Now, there was a little bit of back and forth, but yes, they were willing to do this for me. So while they were already out, they'd run a three-phase power cable to a new meter box on the front of my house and then perform what's called a wire back to where the existing consumer unit was. Now, it's not quite as simple as putting a new cable directly where it used to be. They had to use routing that worked for an existing built house and a lived-in house at that. Fortunately, I have a suspended floor, so they could run that wire back to the new meter box outside the front of our house. And from the meter box, there would be a new connection to the road. And once all this was done, I would then just need my new meter installed. This was the job of my energy supplier, Octopus. Links in the description for the Octopus referral code, by the way. But they weren't willing to carry out the wire back between the meter to my consumer unit in three-phase. I did inquire at the cost from the subcontractor, but they never really got back to me. Now, this isn't an issue because this is classed as your property, so you would just get your electrician to carry out this part. And for me, this is where I carry out this part by installing a great big fat 5-core 25mm steel wired armoured cable under the floor and back to that meter box. Since you're going to have an electrician in, you'd also be upgrading your consumer unit or fuse board for a 3-phase fuse board at this point. As you explain to your DNO that you're going to be installing a fast EV charger and most definitely not doing this for a large battery project, you'll also be installing that too. Now, this whole process can be expensive, and even though it's been free for me to get this to the meter, I still had to buy a cable, a new consumer unit, but I was going to be doing that anyway. Ours was well outdated. If you're going to have to pay for this install, well then you've just got to get a quote and find out what the price is for you. But if you, like me, have an older property and something called that loop supply, a shared supply between you and your neighbours, then you can benefit from the unlooping process. If you just want to find out whether you have a loop supply, there are electricity maps for your property which will show you where the cables go. This is a good step if you're considering this journey. Okay, but why does this cost so much? I'm a complete nerd, and with my electrical interests, the cable jointing process was not something that I've seen before in person. So all of this was quite interesting to me, and I spent most of the time that day chatting with the lads and watching what they were doing. Don't worry, I wasn't being annoying. I supplied them with tea, coffee and bacon rolls, so they were happy, and I was incredibly grateful for this free upgrade. So what is the process? What exactly happens? Hopefully this will explain why it's such a costly process. There was at least 10 people physically involved, and no doubt a few more in the office dealing with all the back end stuff. Okay, so step 1 is for those that have a loop supply. You can get all this work carried out for free, remember. If you don't have a loop supply, then step 1 for you is to cry about the money that you've got to spend for a new connection for 3-phase. So for the people like me, contact your DNO and ask them to unloop your energy supply for an EV charger. Once they've confirmed that you have a loop supply, have a discussion about upgrading to 3-phase power while they're already doing the work. Quote their super fast plans, which I've linked in the description below. It would be ideal to get their agreement in an email. Step 2 for those that don't have a loop supply is to stop crying now and dry your eyes. Step 3 is a site visit. They'll come out and look at what they need and what they can do, and they'll make you an offer. This could be with a cost or without a cost, depending on what we've talked about before. It was at this stage that they attempted to speak to my neighbours about accessing their property and turning off their electricity for an hour to carry out the unlooping. This means that they effectively cut my cable that came from my neighbour's fuse cutout, so it's no longer linked, and the open cable that runs between the two houses is just left underground, dormant. Does this count as littering? Fortunately, I've got a good relationship with my neighbours, so we're currently hooked on next door's telephone line, and they were happy for this to happen. Step 4, you would then agree to go ahead. At this point, it's a bit of a waiting game and things will slow down. The DNO explained to me that there's a waiting list of around 14 months for new connections. And let's face it, I have a connection, so I'm not exactly high priority. My heart sank. And I'm not sure whether they were just saying this so that when the installation date came quicker than they quoted, that I'd be super happy. Well, if that was their aim, it worked. Step 5. The DNO will arrange what they need to arrange from their end and organise for footpath or road closures if needed, which, to be honest, is probably going to be the case for most people, as their connection is going to be external to the property. Okay, step 6 now, the big day, or possibly days. We were booked in for the electrical switch day, and the day before a contractor came and dug out the footpath. They put barriers around and they dug up an area where the cable was going to come in front of the house. I wasn't around and I missed this, and I was half expecting to have them dug up our lawn all the way to the road with a decent depth, as the cable needs to be buried quite deep. But As it turns out, they use some form of non-trenching method. My research discovered that this was called molding, using compressed air and a ram to punch through a hole. It left a nice neat cable run ready for the next day. I learned something new as well. They turned up just before 9 AM on the big day, and the inside lads worked out what they needed to do. As quick as I could get the living room carpet up, they got their drill and unscrewed the existing hatches. I was on my way to get my drill, and it was at this point I realised that I wasn't going to need to lift a finger this day. I mean, other than the bacon sandwiches, which actually my wife did anyway because I was too busy chatting. As with most electrical things, the removing of the existing supply is one of the last things to be done. So a new cable was run under the floor, making use of the void, with a hole punched through the brick wall outside the front where the new meter box was going to be. They terminated that cable and populated that meter box, which left them ready for the connection in the road end. Now, it's this bit that's always amazed me. There's a cable that's been in the ground since the 1960s, so around 60 years old, and it feeds all of the houses on our road. According to the plans they gave me, this is a 120 square millimeter copper cable. How will that supply, say, 200 fully electric houses? The first step for the DNO was to connect up the earth around the area which they were working in. This outer sheath was the earth connection back to the transformer, and it's made of lead. I'm not going to give every step here because this isn't a guide on how to do an in-road connection, but these guys are another breed, working in muddy holes and carrying out a step-by-step process designed to keep them safe and provide reliable connections. But moving on, he used some kind of wedge to remove the outer lead entirely from a section of the cable. I guess this is a good time for them to inspect the condition of a 60-year-old cable, and he told me it was good. They then blocked the cables to separate each of the 4 cores. They're all kind of at a right angle in the middle, which makes them round on the outside. This is the bit that I would be scared of. In reality, most people, if they're going to have an EV charger fitted or some of this technology, or generally have a need for 3-phase power, there's already going to be an electrician involved, and it might have been the electrician that alerted them to a loop supply. But having said that, if you'd rather liaise and organise with your DNO, you totally could. Now, as I said, the electrical connection for me was free. The power to my house was restored for free, but at this point I don't have 3-phase power under the stairs or the equipment to allow me to connect to 3-phase devices. Of course, with a new consumer unit, I can make use of the existing single-phase circuits and then add new 3-phase circuits too, voltage and earth path resistance. For the electricians out there, the ZE. As I said, they filled their connection in with resin, which had some sand along with it as a bulking agent. That's new to me. Any resin that I've used comes in a little hand-triggered squeezy pot. This was buckets worth of resin pouches. I'm assured that these connections last for years to come. Meanwhile, in the house, they made their last few single-phase connections, which meant the 2 lads from National Grid could go next door to cut the cabling of our old supply. This was then cut off in my house, and then there was just some finishing up and final tests, with my meter tails being connected up to handy blocks under the stairs. We move on to the next day, where the holes were filled in and the path was re-tarmacked. Honestly, this was such a simple process, but given that there's elements of needing to understand electrical systems and jargon, I would always encourage anyone considering to make sure that they have an electrician looking over the install for them. Well, to just keep the process simple. So it's my responsibility to install this massive cable under my stairs and to the meter box at the front of the house, along with a 3-phase distribution board. And these things are absolutely humongous when compared to single-phase equipment. So it's probably good to make sure that you've got the space for this before you even start. It raises some questions. If my entire estate has a loop supply, and I know that that's quite a common thing for properties in the UK that are a little older, then how many potential new connections might the electrical network operators have to install over time? It's quite scary, isn't it? But like most things, Rome wasn't built in a day, and we're progressively going to be using more electricity as we replace our use of oil. But having said that, the cable in the road that feeds all of these houses wasn't that big. My plans describe it as a 0.2 CU cable. If anyone can tell me in the comments below the amount of current that cable should be able to take, let me know, and we could work out how many houses can run a charger off that cable. So summing up, one final thought. We see these electrical company vans around and they turn up like bees. We had 5 different vans outside our house and we don't always realize what they do and how much work there is for them to do. So let's be patient with them if you need them to carry things out. If you've had an unloop supply or an electrical connection upgrade, then let me know in the comments. I would love to know what your experience was and above all, how much it cost you. I still cannot believe that we got this for free. It's probably the first thing in my life that I've ever got for free. So now I have the connection, it's time for me to make use of the upgraded connection, and that's what I'll be getting on with in my installation work in the next video. We got that big cable, we've got a consumer unit, we've got an EV charger, we've got an inverter. So much to do. Until next time, Battery Man out. On 3's page, it's a no-brainer. Bainer? Look, if you've made it this far, thank you. And you really should have subscribed and liked this video because you're one of the hardcores that stay to the end. Well done, you. Please now like and subscribe. A lot of effort went into this video. I hope it's been useful for you. Bye!